I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. On the Senate floor Thursday, Majority Whip Dick Durbin blasted Fox News for the network's decision to not air tonight's January 6th committee hearing. Durbin accused the network of profiting off of false 2020 election claims. Fox News has received criticism over the decision to not air the primetime hearing since announcing their coverage plans. Durbin also praised Republican lawmakers Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney for serving on the January 6th committee. The Illinois Democrat noted that he respects Cheney's courage to make the committee bipartisan, despite disagreeing with the Wyoming lawmaker, quote, on virtually every other issue. Listen in for his full remarks.
Mr. President, this evening the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol will hold its first public hearing. For more than 10 months, the January 6th Committee has labored diligently to discover and document the truth about the day we nearly lost our democracy. This evening, the committee will begin to lay out publicly for the first time the coordinated plan in place to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election and prevent the peaceful transition of power to a new administration in America. Those are incredible words that I've just spoken, but they reflect the reality of January 6, 2021. Among their witnesses will be Capitol Police Officer Caroline Edwards, one of the more than 140 Capitol and Metropolitan Police officers who were injured when the mob attacked the Capitol. To Officer Edwards and all the police officers who defended American democracy that day and who continue to protect this Capitol every day, we owe more than our thanks. January 6 revealed to the world how fragile democracy can be even in America. Keeping our democracy requires vigilance and truth. Often it requires sacrifice, and there must be a willingness to accept that truth. It is regrettable, no, it is shameful, that our Republican colleagues in the Senate filibustered the creation of an independent, bipartisan commission to investigate what happened January 6th. Mr. President, I recall that moment, and I'm sure you do as well. It was slightly after 2 o'clock, just a few minutes after 2 o'clock. Vice President Pence was presiding over the United States Senate as we went through the orderly constitutional process of counting the electoral votes. I looked up from my chair to see the Secret Service come in and physically quickly remove the Vice President from that chair. The events that unfolded in the next few minutes were hard to imagine could ever occur in the United States of America. We were told to sit safely in our chairs. This was a secure chamber, and be prepared for other staffers from around the Capitol to join us. Not 10 minutes later, a member of the Capitol Police stood before us and said, as quickly as possible, evacuate this chamber. Hard to imagine in the United States of America. We've seen the videos. We know what happened. There's no doubt what happened that day. And what an impression it must have left on the rest of the world. What would we think at this moment in time if a mob with battering rams beat down the doors of Parliament and entered the House of Commons and the House of Lords? Would we not say on this side of the ocean, my God, what's happened to the United Kingdom? Can this government survive? Can that country survive? The same questions were being asked about America because of that insurrectionist mob on January 6th. The proposal was made, and it was a legitimate, thoughtful, good faith proposal to establish a bipartisan commission to get to the bottom of it. Who was behind it? And to ask the hard questions. What role did President Donald Trump play in what unfolded after his rally on January 6, 2021? Some people don't even want to raise the question, let alone hear the answer. History demands truth. Unless we have reached a point that we saw in the times of the Soviet Union, when they refused to print in their daily newspapers plane crashes, it was bad news. They didn't want to peddle any bad news, and the official party organ is Vestia. No, that was the reality of the Soviet Union. Deny the truth, rewrite history. We see the same thing occurring today. The American people are going to learn the truth. All three major broadcast networks and all but one cable news network will carry this evening's hearing live. What cable news network might not require the broadcast of this? I'm going to guess Fox News, and I'm right. Think about that for a second. Clearly, Fox News, which profits off the big lie of Donald Trump, it matters more to them to continue that relationship than to tell the truth to their viewers. The members of the Select Committee have undertaken their duty with uncommon courage, and I want to single out in particular Congressman Adam Kinzinger from the state of Illinois. We're not close friends. We've worked on a few things together, but I have the highest regard and admiration for the courage that he's shown throughout this travail. And the fact that he would volunteer against the wishes of the Republican House leadership to make this committee bipartisan is a tribute to his citizenship and his commitment to this nation. The same thing, of course, is true for Representative Liz Cheney. She has a lot at stake. Representative Kinzinger has announced his retirement. She continues to represent Wyoming, and I hope she will for many years to come. I may disagree with her on virtually every other issue, but I am in respect for her courage in serving on this bipartisan committee. Mr. President, on another topic, it's no secret that the Federal Bureau of Prisons has been plagued by misconduct. One investigation after another has revealed a culture of abuse, mismanagement, corruption, torture, and death that reaches all the way to the top. One of the most troubling investigations was published last week by National Public Radio and the Marshall Project. The title of the report reads, and I quote, "How the newest federal prison became one of the deadliest." The facility in question I know well, United States Penitentiary Thompson. It's located in my home state of Illinois. In fact, it's a facility that I officially and originally encouraged the federal government to purchase in order to reduce overcrowding at high security prisons. The opening of U.S. Penitentiary Thompson was supposed to improve safety within the Bureau of Prisons, but the reality, sadly, has been the exact opposite. According to this report, 7 inmates at U.S. Penitentiary Thompson have died in just 2 years. 5 of them were reportedly murdered by other inmates. 2 died by suicide. And those deaths are just a snapshot of the grim reality at this facility, the deadly grim reality. The investigation paints a picture of rampant abuse by prison staff. This alleged abuse includes excessive use of 2 kinds of painful restraints, ambulatory restraints and 4-point restraints. The 4 refers to each of a person's limbs, which under this technique are chained to a concrete bed, rendering the individual immobile. This is in an American penitentiary. Bureau of Prison Protocol says that these restraints should be used sparingly and only to momentarily restrain an inmate who presents an active danger to themselves or others. According to this report, some guards at U.S. Penitentiary Thompson have apparently made a habit of regularly using these restraints on inmates, not momentarily, but regularly. In some cases, inmates have reportedly been left chained for hours and days. A lawyer who has spoken with U.S. Penitentiary Thompson inmates said, quote, "The inmates are denied food, they are denied water. Many of them report being left in their own waste. It's really akin to a torture chamber." This is an American prison in my state. The use of restraints and shackles has become so common, inmates have coined a term to describe the scars that it leaves on their arms and legs. It's known as the Thompson tattoo. The report also alleges that the staff at U.S. Penitentiary Thompson have gained a reputation for stoking tensions between cellmates. Make no mistake, this is a special management unit. These are inmates who can be very dangerous, and I understand that. I understood it when the penitentiary was opened. One example that was highlighted in this report is indicative of the challenge. It was the murder of Matthew Phillips, a U.S. Penitentiary Thompson inmate who died in 2020. Mr. Phillips was a Jewish man with a visible Star of David tattoo. The corrections officers at U.S. Penitentiary Thompson reportedly locked Mr. Phillips in a recreation cage with 2 known white supremacists. These inmates beat Mr. Phillips until he was unconscious, and he died from his injuries 3 days later. Both men have since been indicted by the Justice Department on murder and hate crime charges. Following the publication of this shocking report, I joined Senator Duckworth, my colleague from Illinois, and Illinois Congresswoman Cheri Bustos, sending a letter to the Justice Department's Inspector General Michael Horowitz. In it, we urged him to launch a full-scale, immediate investigation into the failures at Thompson Prison. I spoke with General Horowitz yesterday. He confirmed that his office is investigating the deaths at Thompson, along with many other abuses in the Bureau of Prisons. But this report about U.S. Penitentiary Thompson is only the most recent look into the house of horrors that is the Bureau of Prisons, the Federal Bureau of Prisons. We already have ample evidence of a pattern of neglect and abuse that's been embedded in their bureaucracy. Consider, for instance, the Bureau's overuse of restricted housing, the practice of separating inmates from the general prison population, isolating them alone or with one other person for 24 hours at a time. The practice can cause severe mental anguish for inmates and can severely harm the prospects for ever re-entering society. Much like the use of 4-point restraints, restricted housing should, at the Justice Department, noted in 2016, be used rarely, applied fairly, subjected to reasonable constraints. That's the standard, the published standard of the Bureau of Prisons. During the Obama administration, I held 2 hearings which are still fresh in my mind. They were so gripping on the issue of solitary confinement. Following those hearings, the Justice Department took steps to reduce and reform the Bureau of Prisons' use of restricted housing. We started to make real progress. Unfortunately, the progress is erased during the Trump administration. And since the former president left office, the Biden Department of Justice has had plenty of time to change course and leadership, and I've urged them to do so. A year and a half into this administration, nearly 8% of BOP inmates are still being held in restricted housing. That's the same level it was under President Trump. That is just plain unacceptable. The continued overuse of restricted housing, the alleged abuses at Thompson, are among the many instances of misconduct and mismanagement that have occurred under the failed leadership of Bureau of Prisons Director Michael Carvajal. In light of those earlier reports detailing similar failures, I called for Mr. Carvajal's resignation last November. So it was welcome news. About 6 weeks after I asked for his resignation, he announced it. Director Carvajal said he was going to resign. But that was January. Now we're in June, and the Justice Department has shown little progress or urgency in naming Carvajal's replacement. As a result, he is still running and mismanaging the Bureau of Prisons. This recent investigation into Thompson makes it clear there are no excuses for further delay. So today, I'm calling on President Biden, Attorney General Garland, and Deputy Attorney General Monaco to do one of 2 things: either name a new reform-minded director to replace Carvajal immediately, or appoint an acting director until a permanent selection is made. This cannot wait. We need to act before another inmate dies in the custody and care of this federal government. In the coming weeks, the Senate Judiciary Committee, which I chair, will be holding a hearing on the Bureau of Prisons. We will examine these allegations of abuse at Thompson and other facilities. We need answers from the Biden administration on the failure to reduce the use of restricted housing, and we will discuss what BOP must do to address the staffing crisis that has contributed to this disastrous situation. The crisis demands the attention of the highest-ranking officials within the Department of Justice. It's been long overdue. It's time for us to have competent, principled leadership at the Bureau of Prisons. I'm not condemning every person that works at that agency for sure. I've met many of them and respect them. But those that are guilty of this misconduct need to be held accountable, and new leadership is imperative. It's been a long time since we've had that kind of competent, principled leadership. I believe that Attorney General Garland and Deputy Attorney General Monaco We'll choose the right leader to clear out the bureaucratic rot and improve these with significant reforms. But we need to act quickly. Lives are at stake. Mr. President, I yield the floor.